I want to talk about a quick little news update. The System Shock remake is getting a patch. Okay, let me okay, let's go on. Yeah, PC Gamer. So it's getting an update, and I thought this was really funny because there's two real. I'm assuming there's going to be like bug fixes. It's called an overhaul update. Bug fixes, probably other stuff. I don't know. They said it was big, but they didn't go into. I don't think they went into the exact detail of it, of what exactly is in there. But the thing that everyone was focused on was that there is now you can choose a female protagonist. For some reason, everyone was really excited about that. I was like, what? Okay, neat, I guess. It wasn't something that really occurred to me because you see the main character like 2, maybe 3 times in the entire game. One of them is like the game over animation where you can't even really see their face. So like, all right, maybe the voice lines are going to be a little different. Sorry, the grunts are going to be different because like you don't talk. Everyone was focused on that. You know what I was focused on? The revised ending. That was like, I can't believe it. I can't believe I did this. Okay, I did this. This was all me. It was because I bitched about the ending when I talked about the game on this podcast. If you don't remember, the System Shock remake of a classic game from 1995. I love the original System Shock. Was it 95? It was 95, right? Or 94. It was around then. I love System Shock, and I thought the remake was great. I thought it was a legitimately really good remake. If someone is like a little hesitant about playing an old, slightly janky kind of game, even though I think the original holds up pretty well, I would totally recommend them to go play the remake to kind of like, get their feet wet with the series. Really good remake, except with one big asterisk, and that asterisk was the ending section of like the last boss was notably worse than the original. I thought it improved there's like, when I say improved, there's things that I like about the original System Shock that got changed, but I like those things because I'm a freak, but I can recognize that they make a lot of sense to update. The main problems with the game, that like the actual legitimate problems, with like some of the weapon balancing and the cyber world, the hacking sequences, all that stuff got updated and I thought was way better. I thought that was much better executed in the remake. Like exactly what I wanted out of it. But the ending, for some reason, which I didn't even think the ending was particularly bad in the original, in the remake is just really bad. It's like a completely different, that, oh my god, I feel like this is a very deep reach, because I don't want to exactly spoil what it was. You can go look it up, I guess, if you want. It's like, it's not even like the ending story-wise. I mean, like the gameplay segment of the final boss, basically. There's this old... Okay, hey, did anybody ever watch Digressing and Side Questing by Ronnie Ani Edwards on the Game Theorists channel? Rest in peace, dude. He made some really cool videos about game design back in like the early to mid 2010s before he became MatPat's editor and like never made a video of his own again. You can probably still go watch them. And I remember this video of his about, it was called, what was it called? I think it was called Space Shooter Out of Nowhere. And it was basically this phenomenon that would happen in certain like older games where the gameplay style for the whole game was this one thing. You're doing this one thing with this set of mechanics and systems and kind of level design, and then randomly for the final boss it switches to a space shooter because I don't know why the developers thought it would be climactic, but now you're adjusting to it. It's completely unfulfilling because it's a totally different gameplay style. You basically have to learn the ropes of it on the fly. Nothing that you've been learning so far carries over into the actual climax of the game, and even though it's supposed to be cool, but it ends up just coming off as kind of lame and underwhelming for that reason. It's not satisfying. That was the ending of the System Shock remake. It's not a space shooter, but it's the same principle. It's the space shooter out of nowhere. I think that whole video was just in general about like being consistent with what mechanics kind of build up. Mechanics tell a story in and of themselves, and the more complex they get, that's like, the story adding tension or adding more elements, and the final boss of your story should also be like the final boss mechanically, right? Yeah. So there's something about that. But that's basically like the problem I had with the remake. It was a real space shooter out of nowhere. SSOON, space shooter out of nowhere. SSOON. It was a real SSOON moment. That kind of put a real damper. Even when I watched my friend Prox play it on stream, he really enjoyed the remake. He played the original and the remake back to back to see the difference. And even he, who was like very, very excited about the remake the whole time playing it and enjoyed it a lot, was like, man, that ending does suck. So what will the ending be? All I needed them to do, you know what, fuck it, I can't spoil it. It doesn't matter. It's going to get updated anyway. You're going to play that version anyway. My whole problem, to reiterate, with the ending of System Shock Remake was that the whole game up to that point had been basically two different gameplay styles. There is the real world, on the ground, walking around, doing your horror immersive sim, exploring, finding items, solving puzzles thing in first person, shooting enemies, all that good stuff, finding key cards and tracing your steps back around the space station, all that good stuff that you're doing. And then there's the hacking segments where you go into cyberspace and it turns into a kind of flight simulator-esque, like a shooter, a much more arcadey feeling shooter in these little kind of enclosed rooms where you've got these combat encounters versus like the firewall antivirus kind of things that Shodan is throwing at you. So in the original, I found the cyberspace sections to be very, very disorienting and kind of confusing because of it's all wireframes and it looks the graphics were just too primitive at the time to, I think, really communicate what they were trying to do. It's very 90s cyberspace, but when you actually have to play it, you're like, oh god, I feel sick. The remake touched it up just enough to make it about like, okay, this is like basically squarely about combat encounters. This is all about flying around and shooting and avoiding and ducking and weaving and spinning around, right? And they made it feel pretty good and not confusing. And I was like, oh, awesome. So because the final boss of the original takes place in cyberspace when you got to hack into Shodan to destroy it for good, that's going to be the end. It's like there's going to be a big whole section going up, because I mean those whole like last two levels of the space station really, that's like putting all of your skills to the test for the of the on the ground, the meat space stuff, and then the cyberspace stuff. That's going to be like the final boss, and everything's going to tie around. There's going to be a big, difficult, crazy final boss in cyberspace, facing off with Shodan, and then the actual ending of the remake is you go into cyberspace and you're like on the ground and you have a weird cyber gun and it's like the ground controls, but you're just like shooting at stuff. You're shooting at targets, and then there's a big squid in the center that's Shodan, and you shoot at it and it's not really clear if you're doing damage. and like enemies pop up, and the enemies are clearly not designed for this like on the ground style of gameplay. Like they're designed for you to be like floating around in space and able to move in 3 dimensions. And then because of that, you like die a lot, because you die like instantly. And when you die, you just get respawned exactly where you were standing, so it feels pointless. And it's just like, okay, all right. And then you shoot the big squid enough times, and it's like, oh, I guess I did damage to it. And then Shodan dies, and then you win. And it was like, oh, that kind of sucked and was slow and kind of confusing, and you know, it was a SSOON. And it was genuinely my biggest complaint with the game was, how did they even come up with something this bad? It felt like so obvious what they should have done. So I am extremely interested to see what the 1.2 update will be. In fact, at the very end of this article, the business development director, Larry Cooperman, says, quote, "A lot of the criticism that we received was, you spent this whole game collecting items, gearing yourself up for this big battle, and then all of your stuff was gone. You're, oh, no, wait, that's not Larry Cooperman. Who's Kick? Which one is Kick? It's like an interesting name. Stephen Kick, the Night Dive founder. Yeah, he said that. You're left with just this one weapon to play what boils down to a mini game. It's been completely reworked. Thank God. Just make it a cyberspace section and make it like a crazy combat encounter. That's all I want. That's all I want is like a crazy cyberspace combat encounter that pushes it to the limit, you know? For the final battle, the final climax. That's all I wanted. So that was exciting, and I just found it funny that everyone focused on on the female playable character, and I was like, the revised ending? Reworked ending?